Keeping the history and the memories of the Holocaust alive are the dedicated works of three giants bent on educating today's generation. John de Aquila, GI, who helped with liberating thousands from the Nazi concentration camps during World War II. Holocaust survivor Werner Reich, who was sent to Auschwitz and endured a 7-day death march. And the tireless efforts of Bill Tingling, director of School News and the Words of Bonds project. Together, these three men have taken on the relentless task of educating, influencing, and empowering the youths about the atrocities of the past and teaching the value of love and tolerance. The ceremony was a memorial to Zvi Bielski, a local and international messenger of love and tolerance, and whose father, Zus Bielski, rescued over 1,200 Jews from Hitler's regime.
I went to many Holocaust events, and this one was one of the most amazing ones. To hear people talking about this was absolutely amazing experience.
It was amazing. I'm from Israel, and I think I learned a lot from this presentation, so thank you.
So I want to thank you so much. It was a very powerful, moving event. You honored the speaker, and it's, very important member of the family. And if we could be of any help to you in the future, please feel free to call on the Bielskis. Between myself and my daughter and my son, we'll help you because we think what you're doing is marvelous. For the community,
carrying on zeal,
educating the youth, and I really appreciate it. And the speakers were amazing, very powerful, very moving.
I also want to thank you, Bill, for everything that you did tonight. This was an amazing program, and to give Zvi what we say is the kavod, the respect of what he did through his life, which was an extension of his father and his uncles, is a wonderful thing, and we thank you for that.
This was an amazing event. We appreciate it so much, and you really have motivated me to remember to stay out of my comfort zone and to remember the past and prevent the atrocities of the past from happening again. And I want to do whatever I can to help you get the word out and to spread the word to my generation and future generations. And from a young Bielski perspective, it's so important that we do that. And the speakers tonight reminded me that it's not just one story of fighting. There's people who fought just for themselves, and just fascinating speakers, fascinating event. Thank you so much.
I was a communications officer on an LST, and our action was in the invasion of Okinawa.
I was very impressed, educated of what went on with the Holocaust, and I had no idea until Myrna talked about the different Auschwitz, and I was thoroughly educated today.
Well, I just want to thank Mr. Wiener so much for coming tonight and for sharing those wonderful words with us in regards to how we can correct the future in regards to preventing atrocities and hate crimes.
I'm Nina Wiener, and I'm the president of the ISEF Foundation that has been distributing scholarships to Israeli from disadvantaged background to get a college education for the past 37 years. It's been an honor for me when I was asked by Bill Tingling to be the moderator for this special
On Thursday, November 12, 2013, School News Nationwide and its Words of Bonds project paid tribute to the legendary Zvi Bielski, son of the famous Zus Bielski of the Bielski brothers. Paying tribute to Zvi Bielski was the United States Army Color Guards, and the singing of the national anthem and the Israeli national anthem by Cantor Paul Zinn.
Through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we...
Immediately following the singing of the U.S. national anthem was the singing of the Israeli national anthem.
נפש יהודי הומייה ולפתי מזרח קדימה
audience, this was their very first time hearing the Israeli national anthem.
Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim.
This past April 18th, on Holocaust Remembrance Day, Yom HaShoah, Zvi Bielski and Bill Tingling were the main speakers for the school news nationwide at Symphony Space in New York. Tragically, Zvi Bielski passed away a few days later. Zvi was the son of the heroic leader Zus Bielski. Zus and his two brothers, the Bielski brothers, as many of us know them as legendary figures, were heroic resistance fighters. Zvi said that one of the saddest periods in the history of mankind was when 6 million Jews, millions of non-Jews, were murdered during the Nazi regime, and many people stood by and did nothing. In the spirit of tolerance and as an educator, Zvi traveled the world, influencing and educating young people about the atrocities of the past and teaching them the value of love and tolerance. He spent many of his formidable years visiting hundreds of New York City schools, places of worship, civic arenas, sharing stories of his father and uncle's heroic activities. He addressed hate crimes, combating bullying while focusing on the importance of tolerance and acceptance of others. Most are relevant subject for all of us today. Although the Shoah is the most tragic period, hundreds of people, including Holocaust survivors, parents, educators, and students, came out to hear Zvi speak. This evening is a tribute to him. And for me, it's been a special added pleasure to get to meet some of the members of the family. Okay. I would like now to introduce Dr. Jacob Bielski, Zvi brother, who will speak on behalf of the Bielski family.
The reason 456, one out of every 456 Jewish people who are walking around today is because that guy's father, Zus Bielski, who was Daniel Craig in the movie. Stand up, please, Robert. His father decided, despite some early objections from Zus, my father, and Asael, who died at the end of the war, his son just came over here a week ago or two, he decided we're going to save every Jewish person possible. And my father said, what are you kidding? We gotta feed these people. We gotta get more weapons. We gotta kill Germans. What are you, crazy? There's 10 million Jews all over the place. We gotta kill those people. So we said, listen, at the end of the war, first of all, we won't know if any Jews are alive in the first place. So we're gonna save as many as we can. Maybe we'll start a Jewish nation at the end, who knows? And that's what happened. Zvi was right, my father was wrong, and that's the reason we're all here today, because of that man. His vision was translated through my brother rather than me. I'm more like my father. I was in the Marine Corps, the US Marine Corps, and the Israeli Army. My brother was in Israeli paratroopers, and two of my boys were in Israeli paratroopers. So my father's influence on my side was revenge and mastery over the environment, whereas my brother, Zvi, he actually felt the same way Tuvia did. Got to save as many people as possible. This killing business doesn't work. And that's exactly what he did. He went around the earth, believe it or not, and that's what he sold to whoever would listen, not just Jewish people. He said, if anybody wants to kill you for whatever reason, and you have not committed a crime, he would mention that, of course. So he said, it's your obligation as a human being to fight and survive against any kind of oppression. And I don't know why Bill does this. I mean, the answer is obvious. It's just organization. And who organized this? Black man. For a reason. To get the message across that nobody should be oppressed. And that was my brother's mission, and that's the mission of all the Bielskis. Let it be known. Do not oppress, or you meet up somebody like Bielski, and it's not a good thing. That also goes for Iran and the rest of the students who think with their cartoons and TV shows that they're going to obliterate the Jewish nation again. It's just not going to happen.
I would like to introduce Rebecca Silverstein, Director of New York Region B'nai Zion Foundation.
In the week of Kristallnacht, it's a true honor to be addressed by Werner Reich and liberating American GI John D'Aquila. It is also most special to honor the courage and memory of Zus Bielski. I'm a grandchild of a survivor, so for me this is really a very meaningful cause. Defiance is one of the defining, I would say, movies of my family story. It's a very similar story to my grandfather. Survivors of the Holocaust included thousands of Jewish orphans. Ahava Village, which began as an orphanage in Berlin, was moved with 50 children in 1938 to carry out Bialik in Israel. Its history includes helping rebuild the broken lives of countless Holocaust orphans. Subsequently, Ahava became a residential center for Israeli children, ages 6 to 18, taken by the court from worst-case home situations where they have suffered extreme abuse and neglect. Ahava provides these children with a nurturing, healing environment, hope for a brighter future, and the capacity to become fully functioning members of Israeli society. It's truly the ultimate response to the evils of Kristallnacht.
In many ways, I'm delighted to say just a few words about Bill, although I think that all of you knows him well and that he really doesn't need an introduction. The way I think of Bill is that some angel, somebody must have touched on his shoulder, and he was blessed with many, and he is blessed until today, with many utopian feelings in a way, but with goodwill, with hard work, I think he's accomplishing quite a bit. And linking the tragedy of the Holocaust with some of the subjects that are resonant today in many schools and within American youth, and very often that have also had grandparents who have suffered tremendous injustice and killing through slavery. I think in an unreligious way, it's an outstanding idea. And from the heart, I can say that for me anyway, you're like a tzaddik. You're doing some very, very important work, Bill. And that's why, despite the situation I'm in today, I just could not say no to you. And I'm so happy I did come. So Bill, without further ado, please come here and tell us a little bit for the rest of the evening.
As you know, I am the president of the School News Nationwide Words of Bonds project. It is an organization that works to educate, influence, and empower our nation's youth with essential tools to achieve academic and social excellence. Our partners are Holocaust survivors, African American seniors, museums, schools, universities, and local police precincts, all in the field of helping American youth to become productive, constructive members of society. Ziv and I were very good friends. He was a speaker at the School News Nationwide Words of Bonds Holocaust Remembrance Day, Yom HaShoah, on Monday, April 8th, 2013 at Symphony Space. Zus Bielski was the son of, as you know, the heroic leader Zus Bielski, and Zus and his two brothers, the Bielski brothers, heroic resistance saved over 1,200 Jews from the Nazi onslaught during World War II. And from those saved people today, their offspring has surpassed more than 25,000. Their bravery, resistance, tactics, and sheer ingenuity, well known, enable each of our guests to meet the offspring of many family members of those they helped rescue from what would have been certain death. Their incredible story of survival is depicted in the movie Defiance, which many of you may have seen. Zvi said that one of the saddest periods in history was when 6 million Jews and millions of non-Jews were murdered during the Nazi regime, and many people stood by and did nothing. According to the New York State Division of Criminal Justice, hate crimes across New York jumped to 14%, led by an increase in attacks on Jews, Jewish institutions, and other ethnic groups. The report found that nearly a quarter of all attacks were carried out by 2 or more people. More than 7% were carried out by 4 or more people. Also, 31% of all known offenders were aged 24 or younger. 12.2% of all known offenders were women. To help combat these hate crimes, Zvi traveled the world engaging in educating, influencing, and empowering the youth about the atrocities of the past and the value of love and tolerance. He spent many of his formidable years visiting hundreds of New York City schools, places of worship, civic arenas, sharing stories of his father and his uncle's heroic activities, addressing hate crimes, combating bullying, while focusing on the importance of tolerance and the acceptance of others. Likewise, the School News Nationwide organization developed a first-of-its-kind documentary project titled Words of Bonds. Students interview Holocaust survivors, hearing their stories, and thereafter applying compiled ideals and constructive means to combat and prevent hate crime. Although Shoah is one of the saddest periods of history, where 6 million Jews and millions of non-Jews were murdered during the Nazi regime, hundreds of people, including Holocaust survivors, parents, educators, and students came out at all the time to hear Zvi speak. The School News Nationwide organization took a poll and asked, how many students or how many people know about the Holocaust? Some of these questions included, when did the Holocaust begin? What does the word Holocaust mean? What is bullying? What happens when others stand by and watch hate crimes take place? What were extermination camps? Many of them could not answer these questions, and I believe that it is this ignorance that yields problems that we face now and will face in the future. Many people, on the other hand, could answer these questions, but could not give an accurate answer as to why the Holocaust began, which is a very important thing to know. Allow me to share some history with you for a few seconds. After Germany's defeat in World War I, Hitler, the leader of the Nazis, focused on an ethnic people, particularly the Jews, as a source for Germany's ills. In 1933, the Jewish population of Europe stood at over 9 million people. The Nazis used propaganda and pseudo-scientific ideas in their propaganding to build popular support for racist politics and policies. To spread their racist ideas, the Nazis focused their attention on the German youth. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism did not end with the defeat of the Nazis in 1945. There have been other hate groups that have developed, which include the KKK, which upholds the anti-Semitic beliefs and practice of Holocaust denial. Perez, an 89-year-old Nobel Peace Prize laureate, linked the Nazis' genocide to Iran's suspected drive to acquire nuclear bombs and its leaders' repeated references to the destruction of a people and its denial of the Holocaust. The civilized world must ask itself how it is still possible for the leadership like that of the former president of Iran to openly deny the Holocaust and threaten another Holocaust. Those who ignore the threat of a Holocaust, ignores one nation, must know that the threat of a Holocaust against one nation is a threat of a Holocaust against all nations. So, with your help, guidance, and influence, we will continue to use the principles that which we positively educate. If we positively educate one person, that one person educates 1,000 people, and that 1,000 people can educate and influence 10,000 people. What has changed since the Holocaust is the determination and the ability, like that of Zvi Bielski, to educate, influence, and empower. Moreover, to stand up and to say no to destructive ideas and injustice. Thank you. Nina, since time is of the essence, let me take the opportunity of bringing to you two wonderful people, an American GI, a Holocaust survivor who was rescued from the concentration camp in Mansenhau, and they are here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Wiener Reicher and Mr. John Aquila, two fantastic American cornerstones.
Good evening. In 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power, and he immediately enforced certain rules which he visualized in his book, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. And one of the first rules that he actually enforced was the law of racial purity. The law of racial purity basically said that anybody who's not an Aryan has no place in Germany. And that meant people of Jewish ancestry, people who were gypsies, people who were black or with black ancestors. Many people, whenever I speak about black people in Germany, people say, well, what are you talking about? There were no black people. Germany had a great number of black people because Germany had colonies in Africa, and their soldiers intermarried with black women in Africa. And then after World War I, many people from the French Foreign Legion, they came to Germany, and they also intermarried with German women. So we had these laws of racial purity. Amongst the first rules against the Jews, there were something like 2,000 of them, including that an Aryan was not permitted to drink the milk owned by milk of a cow that was owned by Jews. We went to the complete extremes. And one of the first rules that they came up with that Jews could not work for hospitals, schools, colleges, and corporations. My father was a mechanical and electrical engineer. He worked for Siemens, and in 1933 he lost his job. So we emigrated from Germany to Yugoslavia, 2 countries away. We were sure that 2 countries is safe, number one. Number two, Hitler's not going to last more than maybe 2 years, and then we'll come back. And that's a picture of my sister and myself. I used to be adorable in those days. And this is the town we moved to, Zagreb. Beautiful, beautiful town, gorgeous, even today. Problem was we had to learn 2 new languages. One of them was Croat and the other one was Serbian. My parents never ever learned it because the grammar is absolutely ridiculous. But we kids, we learned it. And that's a picture of me when I was about 11 years old. I don't have many other pictures of myself. My father died in 1940, and in 1941, Germany invaded Yugoslavia. And the part where I lived, Croatia, came under the ruling of Dr. Ante Pavelic and his Ustaše. And they were extremely cruel and brutal. Just to give you an idea, here's a poster which says, "He who does not drink 2 pints of Serbian blood is not a true Croat." Just to give you the type of an idea that these people pursued. We had to wear the letter Ž, which stands for Židov, and we had to wear one in the front and also another one in the back, as you can see, 2 of them. They opened immediately a concentration camp called Jasenovac, and the estimates really vary. They range from 200,000 to 600,000. But the point is this, that all the people killed there were killed by 2 methods. One of them by forced starvation, by simply locking up people in camps and not giving them food, and the other one is by cutting their throats. They had competitions between soldiers who can cut the most throats. In the Germans kept supporting the Croats, and in one town in Kragujevac, 2 German soldiers were shot by the partisans, and the military went to the local high school and picked up 200 high school students and shot them. There were soldiers all over the streets, and my mother, who happens to have been an American citizen and felt safe for herself, and she was also the bearer of an Iron Cross, which she won during World War I. She had been a very, very good German, felt safe for herself, but she didn't feel safe for my sister and me. And so she placed my sister with one family and me with another. I was at that time 13 years old. Now, I didn't know these people from a hole in the wall. And I lived in an apartment. I couldn't go near the window. I couldn't wear shoes. And it was a very, very restrictive life, because when I was a kid, the relationship between adults and children was different than it's now. My parents never ever spoke about Hitler and concentration camps or any of these things. The first time I realized what a concentration camp was when I was in one, and then obviously it was too late. And so I was hidden like that for 2 years. One morning there was a knock at the door and the Gestapo agent came. Why the Gestapo? Because the couple where I stayed were developing films for the resistance movement. They were making enlargements, and I helped them with that work. And so the Gestapo, the Germans, were actually in a Croat territory, but they were looking for people who were taking pictures of German soldiers in Bosnia or wherever. And so they arrested the couple, and they arrested me too. I was 15 at that time. And the first thing they did is they took me down to the headquarters and they beat the living daylights out of me. They really beat me up, and I still remember a small, stocky Gestapo agent who had great fun telling me to stand up in front of him, and then he hit me right across the face, and I flew across the room, and at one point I cut my head. And he thought it was very, very funny. He did it several times. Then they locked me up in a basement cell where there was no bed or anything whatsoever, and I just had to sleep on the floor. And I was there for 3 days. And after 3 days, I was moved to a border town between Croatia and Slovenia. And there I spent 3 days in a cell filled with millions and millions of fleas. It must have been a drunk tank sometimes before. And from there, I was moved to Graz, Austria. And in Graz, Austria, I was in this particular building, which still today is the police headquarters in Graz. I was up on the 3rd floor in a little room cell with 3 other kids. 2 of them had been arrested for burglary, and the 3rd kid had murdered his mother. And I was the 4th criminal there. And I stayed there for about 6 weeks, and one day I looked into the prison yard from my window, and this is a picture of that particular police station and the prison yard, and I saw my mother walking around in a circle. And that's the very last time I ever saw my mother. From there I was shipped to Vienna, the city of my dreams, and I found myself in this house of worship. Actually, by the time I came there, it didn't look like this anymore. It looked like this. It was totally demolished inside. There was broken glass, there was dirt, soot, everything. And I slept in a corner because the benches were totally ruined. I slept on the floor. And the next day, I and 100 other people were sent on a train, on a 2-day train ride, and we ended up in Theresienstadt. It's a fortress that had been built about 1780, and as you can see, the thickness of the walls and the height of the walls and even the shape of it. It was just a perfect fortress, and when planes were invented, fortresses became a stupid place because all you do is you fly over and drop a bomb. You know, it's pretty useless. So the military moved out and civilians moved in, and about 2,900 people lived there, 2,900. And when Hitler came to when he invaded Czechoslovakia, he said, this is a perfect place for a concentration camp. So he removed the 2,900 people and replaced them with 90,000 civilians. And this is the way the place looked then and looks now. It was old and dilapidated. This is where some of us slept, and this is where most of the people slept. You can imagine where 2,900 people lived before, suddenly 30 times as many people. So every little space was occupied. This is where we washed ourselves, and this is how people arrived after I came there, because I had to help lay these railroad lines, railroad tracks, and if anybody offers you a job doing that, refuse it. Find an excuse. It's extremely hard work. And this is a typical building in which we lived. I had to make brooms, I had to make baskets, I also had to exterminate vermin from the building. So what we did is we taped up all the windows, and then we took cyclone gas, which is cyanide gas, and we put on gas masks, and we opened these with a metal crown. We put the metal crown on top of the can, and then with a big hammer hit that crown, and then it cut everything in one blow, and you just spilled the pellets around the building, run out, slammed the door, came back next day, put on gas mask, aired the place, and swept out dead rats. The Nazis tried to use this cyclone gas for prisoners in Auschwitz, but it didn't work too well. It was much, much too slow. So eventually what they've done is they persuaded the company that was making this cyclone gas to make a cyclone B gas with prussic acid, which speeded up the process. With this gas, they tested it on prisoners of war, and the cyclone gas, and they were bleeding from their noses, from their ears, from their eyes, and the Nazis said it was much too slow. And so they used cyclone B gas. I was in that camp in Terezin for about 11 months, and after 11 months, they brought in some railroad cars, strictly cattle cars, without any beds, without anything inside. And they just loaded us up, 100 people per car. They put in a bucket to be used as a toilet, and then they locked up the windows and the doors, and off we went on a 3-day ride east. We didn't have the slightest idea where we were going. Obviously, the bucket overflowed after less than an hour, and for the rest of the trip, we were lying in our own urine and in our feces. And we were all scrunched up, lying there on the floor. And then we arrived and were immediately greeted by a group of SS men and people in uniform. And if you look at it carefully, every single one of these guys had a walking stick, a very heavy walking stick. And they were using these sticks and beating the living daylights out of us. They hit us over the heads, over the legs, wherever. Then we looked at the uniforms. They had special uniforms with a big skull and crossbone up on the top and on the lapel. They were what the Germans called the Sonderkommando, special commando. These people were Germans who had volunteered, not only Germans, they were people from various other countries who had volunteered to kill people, and they were psychologically and physically tested whether they can do it. And once they passed the test, like, don't even want to visualize what the test looked like, then they were given this uniform and they were put in charge of the concentration camps. And we looked to one side and we saw a gate, and we looked at the other one, and all we saw was barbed wire. So we asked somebody, where are we? And they told us, you're in Auschwitz II, or Birkenau. There were 3 Auschwitz camps. There was Auschwitz I, which was strictly for criminals, was an overflow camp of the German penitentiaries. It had murderers, thieves, crooks, gay people, anybody who was locked up in the German penitentiary was sent there. And then these people were used as guards for Auschwitz II, which was the extermination camp. When people say they were in Auschwitz, 99.999% have actually been in Birkenau. They haven't been in Auschwitz I, and hardly anybody has been in Auschwitz III. Auschwitz III was an artificial rubber factory. And so the distance between Auschwitz I and Auschwitz II was a little bit more than a couple of miles, and they just walked back and forth. And this is the way Auschwitz II looked. Everybody arrived at the green spot at the bottom, and then probably 90% of all the people were immediately walked over to the red spots over on the left-hand side. Now, inasmuch as the people didn't come just empty-handed, because the Nazis, the Germans, told them you're being resettled. So take all the properties that you have, that you can possibly carry, and take it with you. So people turned up with hundreds and hundreds of suitcases and bags and everything else. They brought food, they brought their fur coats and everything else. And so they were marched over to the red spots where they were killed and burned, and all the property was sorted in where the black spot is, right in between there, which is the area is called Canada. The area above the green spot was the men's camp and the gypsy camp, and the area below the green spot was the women's camp. And over on the right-hand side, where the blue spot is, there, that was the Germans' headquarters. Although the Allied troops knew what was going on, Auschwitz was not a military target, and therefore not one single bomb ever fell on the gas chambers, on the railroad tracks, or on the German headquarters. This was the way the women looked. They had all their hair shaven off, and just like the men, and they had these gray uniforms. And this is the way the men looked. We had a big triangle and the number. And depending why you were in the camp, the color of the triangle reflected that. So political prisoners, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, gypsies were black, Jews yellow, and thieves and murderers were light and dark green. So just if you look at these colors, it gives you some idea that not everybody in Auschwitz was Jewish. There's always this sort of a fallacy that it's only for Jews. It wasn't. We got a number tattooed on our arms. People who went immediately into the gas chamber never got the number. And this was a typical barrack in which we stayed. There were 6 people on each level, and sometimes the top level would collapse on the middle on the lower level, and kill the people on the lower level. This was a woman's barrack after liberation. Now, if you look at this picture, I'd like to point out one thing which is very important. When this picture was taken, half the people were already missing from the camp. They went on the death march before. So what you see is a half-empty camp, just to give you an idea how crowded it was. I don't know if you can visualize it. It's rather difficult. And this was a man's camp barrack after liberation, and this is also men's barracks after liberation, and the man in the middle has the only 2 properties that we had, a bowl and a spoon. The bowl got filled in the morning with some brown water, and we got 2 ounces of bread made from flour and sawdust. For lunch we got a soup made which consisted of salt water and chopped up dirty unwashed potatoes or turnips, and in the evening we got the same thing again, but we got another 2 ounces of bread. There are estimates that vary between 350 to 450 calories a day. Just to give you an idea, eating that dirty food gave us all dysentery, and this was the toilet which we had to use. And you could spend just a couple of minutes there, and then you were chased away. And this bench they used for punishment. And the prisoners put, if you didn't run fast enough, if you didn't stand in line, if you had an argument with one of the criminals, you put your feet in the 2 holes in the bottom, and then you leaned over, and as demonstrated to General Eisenhower in this picture, and then one of the prisoners held you by the arms, and the other prisoner beat you with a stick. I've seen people dying on this. It is right in this very camp that General Eisenhower said, many GIs don't know what they are fighting for, but now they should know what they're fighting against. And this is a picture of the camp. And every day, all of us had to stand in line and be counted 3 times a day. And if one person was missing, then we had to stand there in rain, snow, sleet, ice, you name it. Didn't care. And then sometimes the Nazis introduced what they called sport. You had to do push-ups, you had to do jumping, you had to roll in the mud. It was great, great fun for them, but for many prisoners it meant death. There was no chance of escaping from the camp. The camp was surrounded by electrically charged barbed wire, guard towers, and there were German shepherds that had been trained to run after people in striped uniforms and tear them apart. And people did try to escape, and they were invariably caught. Once a man tried to escape, they caught him, and they took a barrel, and they hammered nails from the outside of the barrel into the barrel, and they put the man into the barrel, they closed the barrel, and then they rolled it down the hill. I had to watch once how two men were beaten to pulp because they tried to escape. Although well over 1.5 million people came to Auschwitz, only 2 people ever successfully escaped. Just 2. That's it. And remember that many people who came to the camp had military background. They were not just civilians or so, they knew what escape means and how to do it, and they didn't. Many people committed suicide. They just couldn't take the camp. And every day, about half an hour, the power was turned off and the people were removed from the barbed wire, and then the power was turned back on. This is one of the gas chambers, one of the crematoria in the camp. And this is a gas chamber into which naked people had been jammed with their arms raised high, because this way you can put more people into a gas chamber than if their arms are low. And then little children were tossed on top of them, and through this hole in the ceiling, the Cyclone B gas, the prussic acid gas, the pellets were poured in, and the people were killed. And then the chambers were aired afterwards, and a special group of prisoners stripped these prisoners of rings and gold teeth and shoved the bodies into the ovens and burnt them. They brought it to the point of efficiency where they could kill and burn 6,000 people per day. I was there during the time when the Hungarian Jews came in 1944. Day and night they were herded into the gas chambers. And all that remained of them are boxes full of wedding rings, barracks full of shoes and clothing, pots and pans, and empty suitcases. That's all. And this is what we saw. And this is what we smelled. The smell of burning hair and burning flesh. People ask me sometimes, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you in the camp? The worst thing that happened to me in the camp was I was 16 years old. And I didn't know from one day to the next whether I'm going to be alive the next day. It is something that you cannot imagine, and I hope you never will. One day Dr. Mengele came into the camp. Dr. Mengele ran experiments on people. He injected dye into people's eyes. He took twins and broke their legs and cured one twin one way and one twin the other way, and then he killed them both. He was affectionately known as the Angel of Death, because one of his hobbies was to select people for the gas chamber. He had particular great pleasure in that. By the way, Dr. Mengele, in case if you're worried about him, he died in 1989 by drowning in a swimming pool in Brazil. Just for your information. But next to me is a gentleman who knows all about it, because he's the man who was out in the field fighting. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you my dear, good friend, John D'Aquila.
I was a young man of 20 years old when I was drafted into the Army. I had completed 1 year of college, and Uncle Sam said, time to go in. Went into the Army and got basic training as an infantryman. Went through all of the basic training that the infantry goes through. I learned to shoot. I learned survival. But then, as time went by, I decided I couldn't kill. So I asked to be transferred into the medical corps. So I was an aid man. We were fighting in our summer uniforms. We hadn't gotten our winter uniforms yet. And it was cold. We got to the Bastogne, and one of the first few minutes rest we had was there was a ceasefire because of the holidays, and there was a dead cow. And the only way we could warm up is to snuggle up next to the dead cow. And we started our trek to Mauthausen, not knowing what we were going to encounter. There was no intelligence that even our officers knew about the camp. There was nothing told us and nothing told to our officers as we talked later on. And as we're approaching the camp, we see a file of people. I call them walking skeletons. We were afraid to touch them because if we touched them, we were afraid their skin would fall off. And they were all saying, I think, a bastardized word of German, fressen, fressen. To us, the way they were saying it and the way they were showing us, they wanted food to eat. And we, being good GIs, gave them our food. We gave them dinner units, K rations, everything that was bad for them. We were killing them with kindness. We had no idea that they could not digest the food that we were giving them. And as they came along, we get to the camp, and what we saw in the barracks, and we saw out the barracks. Now, you've got to remember, I'm a 21-year-old kid, have never been subjected to anything like this. To see bodies piled up like cordwood, to see bodies just thrown together with no rhyme or reason, just dead bodies. And these were our first impressions. And I stayed there for about 10 days. We finally got soup pots going to start to feed them soup so they can get to learn to eat again. There were people from the Red Cross coming on in, trying to make sense of what we saw. And for the first 10 days, 3 days that I worked with the gas mask on, delousing people, the stench, and I should have said this in the beginning, as we approached Mauthausen, there was a stench in the air that I cannot shake. The stench of burning flesh and death. And I have never smelled that again until I went down to the 9/11 memorial. There I got a whiff of it. But the odor was so strong that it's never left me. It's incredible that something like this will stick with you. As you can see, there are a lot of bodies to be taken care of. And we started to dig mass graves. And then the way that we hired some of the, not hired, we forced some of the townspeople to help us with the burial of these people. And we saw the way they were handling them. I, with my first sergeant, got very, very upset. We reminded these people, these are human beings. You will handle them with care. You don't toss them like a piece of wood into the grave. You place them there. And we got a pretty good result from that.
It was really a very, very inspiring evening. It was inspiring. Bill manages to find the best speakers, very good people, very serious people. One that was in concentration camp, another American who was in the army and liberated the camp where the survivor was there. We heard about an outstanding family, the Bielskis. There were so many important subjects that were touched upon tonight.
I'm Eileen Weiss from Jews Against Genocide of the New York Coalition for Sudan. And the night was extraordinary for me because I find that when you tell personal stories, it has more of an impact than when you just hear 6 million Jews were killed. It's horrible, but to hear the personal stories of survival and of not survival, it's really powerful. But it also made me angry because the exact same thing is happening right now today in Sudan, and nobody is stopping it, and nobody's there are actions that can be taken to stop the murder of children in the Nuba Mountains. Right now they're being bombed, right now as we speak, and nobody's stopping it.
And there's nothing like experience in the sense of a visual experience, to actually hear Holocaust survivors and to actually hear people who are a part of, and it's not just what they were taught, it was things that they actually experienced themselves. The pictures, the horrific graphic pictures that displayed and showed what Jews and other individuals went through. It was, I don't think I've ever experienced, I don't think I was ever educated as I was tonight as to what transpired.
You just witnessed one of the most horrific and vivid, detailed accounts of the horrors of the Holocaust. We should never forget, lest we repeat the atrocities of the past. To support our programs and keep the memory of Zus Bielski alive, please support the School News Nationwide Words of Bonds project by visiting our website at www.wordsofbonds.org.